I never thought a homeowners association president would become my worst nightmare until I watched Brenda Patterson deliberately aim her snowplow attachment straight at my foundation on a frigid February morning in Boulder, Colorado. The winter of 2025 had been brutal. We'd already received over 40 inches of snow by mid-February, and the latest storm had dumped another 14 inches overnight. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the flat irons pink when I heard the rumble of heavy machinery. My house, a modest ranch-style home I'd purchased 3 years ago in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision, sat on a corner lot at the intersection of Aspen Drive and Willow Street. It was a great location, except for one major downside. Brenda Patterson lived directly across from me and served as the HOA president. Brenda was everything you'd expect from a stereotypical HOA tyrant. 52 years old, platinum blonde hair styled in that aggressive bob cut that seemed to scream, "I want to speak to your manager," and a perpetual expression of disapproval etched into her face. She drove a white Escalade with a custom license plate that read HOA Boss and treated our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. I watched through my window as Brenda, sitting in her husband's Ford F-250 with a snowplow blade attached, made her way down Willow Street. Most of my neighbors hired professional snow removal services or used snow blowers, but Brenda insisted on doing it herself. She claimed it was about community service, but I knew it was really about control. She wanted to decide where the snow went, who got plowed out first, and who had to wait. As she approached my corner lot, I noticed something strange. Instead of pushing the snow into the street or creating neat piles along the curb like she'd done for the other houses, she angled the blade directly toward my property. The massive wall of snow, ice, and road salt surged forward, and she dumped the entire load right against my foundation. We're talking about a mountain of snow, at least 4 feet high and running the entire length of my front wall, pressed directly against the brick. I set my coffee down so hard it sloshed onto the counter. "What the hell?" I threw on my boots and coat and rushed outside. The cold hit me like a slap, the temperature hovering around 15 degrees. Brenda was already backing up, preparing to make another pass. "Brenda!" I shouted, waving my arms. "What are you doing?" She stopped the truck and rolled down her window, her face a mask of fake innocence. "Good morning, Jason. Just clearing the streets like I do every storm." "You just piled all that snow against my foundation," I said, pointing at the massive heap. "That's got to be against code. The snow needs to be at least 3 feet away from the foundation to prevent water damage." "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm just doing my civic duty." "If you have a problem with where the snow lands, maybe you should have attended last month's HOA meeting." I had attended last month's meeting. That's when Brenda had proposed a series of absurd new regulations, including a rule that all homeowners had to use specific paint colors from a pre-approved palette if they wanted to repaint their houses. My crime. I'd voted against it, along with 3 other homeowners. We'd actually managed to block the proposal, which required a 2/3 majority to pass. Brenda had been furious. "This is retaliation," I said. "You're angry about the vote." "Don't be ridiculous, Jason. I would never do something so petty." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have the rest of the neighborhood to attend to." She rolled up her window and drove off, leaving me standing in the freezing cold, staring at the wall of snow packed against my house. I could already see water beginning to seep from the compressed snow. The sun was rising, and with it, the temperature would climb above freezing. All that snow would start to melt, and it would have nowhere to go except directly into my foundation. I spent the next 3 hours trying to move the snow. I used a shovel, then a snow blower I borrowed from my neighbor, Tom Richards. Tom lived 2 houses down and had witnessed the whole thing. "That's messed up, man," Tom said, shaking his head as he helped me. "I've never liked Brenda, but this is a new low even for her." "She's done stuff like this before?" I asked, throwing another shovelful of heavy, wet snow onto my lawn. "Not exactly like this, but yeah. Remember the Hendersons? They wanted to put up a fence in their backyard, totally within their rights, met all the local codes. Brenda claimed it violated some obscure HOA covenant and made their lives hell for 6 months. They eventually moved. That's insane." "That's Brenda," Tom said. "She sees the HOA as her personal kingdom. Anyone who challenges her authority becomes a target." By noon, we'd managed to clear most of the snow away from the foundation, but the damage was already done. I could see dark patches on the brick where water had soaked in. My basement window wells were full of slushy water. I grabbed a bucket and started bailing them out, but I had a sinking feeling that water had already gotten inside. When I went down to my basement, my worst fears were confirmed. Water was seeping through the foundation wall in 3 places, creating dark stains on the concrete and pooling on the floor. My basement wasn't finished, but I had stored boxes down there. Holiday decorations, old photographs, some furniture I'd inherited from my grandmother. The water hadn't reached most of it yet, but it was spreading. I immediately called a waterproofing company. The earliest they could send someone out was the next morning. In the meantime, I set up fans, moved everything away from the walls, and used towels to try to soak up the water. It was a losing battle. That evening, I sat down at my computer and started documenting everything. I took photos of the water damage, the remaining snow against my foundation, and screenshots of the weather data showing the temperature fluctuations. I also started researching Colorado HOA laws and homeowner rights. What I found was both encouraging and frustrating. Colorado had some of the stronger homeowner protection laws in the country, but HOAs still wielded significant power. However, Brenda had made a crucial mistake. By deliberately pushing snow against my foundation, she'd caused property damage. That wasn't an HOA dispute anymore. That was a civil matter, potentially even criminal, depending on how a lawyer wanted to argue it. The waterproofing company sent a technician named Mike the next morning. He was in his late 40s, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent years working in harsh conditions. He spent over an hour examining my basement, using moisture meters on the walls, checking for cracks, and documenting everything with his own camera. "This is pretty bad," Mike finally said, straightening up from where he'd been examining the foundation. "You've got significant water penetration. The freeze-thaw cycle, combined with the pressure from all that snow being packed against the wall, has created several small cracks in the foundation. Water's getting in through those cracks and also through the mortar joints between the bricks." "Can it be fixed?" I asked. "Oh yeah, we can fix it, but it's not going to be cheap. We'll need to excavate along the affected wall, seal the foundation from the outside, install proper drainage, and repair the interior damage. We're looking at somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000. I felt my stomach drop. 15 to 20,000. Could be more if we find additional damage once we start digging. The good news is the structural integrity of your foundation isn't compromised. This is fixable. The bad news is water damage never gets better on its own. It only gets worse. How fast does this need to happen?" "I'd say within the next month, before we get any more major snowmelt or spring rains. You've also got a mold risk if this moisture stays in the walls." After Mike left with a written estimate, I sat at my kitchen table feeling a mix of anger and determination. $20,000. I didn't have that kind of money sitting around. I'd have to take out a loan or max out credit cards. And all because Brenda Patterson wanted to throw a tantrum over an HOA vote. I called my insurance company. After explaining the situation to 3 different people and being on hold for a combined 45 minutes, I finally got an answer I didn't want to hear. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sullivan, but flooding caused by snow melt or surface water isn't covered under your standard homeowners policy," the agent said. "You would need separate flood insurance, and even then, this type of situation might not be covered since it involves deliberate action by a third party. This really sounds like a civil matter that you'd need to pursue through the courts. So my insurance won't pay for any of this." "Not under your current policy, no. I'm very sorry." After I hung up, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to be angry, frustrated, and worried. Then I got to work. I sent a certified letter to Brenda Patterson, detailing the incident, including photos, the damage estimate, and a demand that she pay for the repairs. I sent copies to every member of the HOA board: Vice President Linda Kowalski, Secretary Margaret Chen, and Treasurer Robert Fitzgerald. 3 days later, I received a response. Not from Brenda personally, but from the HOA's lawyer, a man named Gregory Winters from a firm in Denver. The letter was exactly what I expected: a complete denial of responsibility. According to Mr. Winters, Mrs. Patterson had been engaging in routine snow removal as part of her volunteer service to the community. The placement of snow was incidental and without malicious intent. Furthermore, the letter claimed that as a homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights, I was responsible for managing snow and water on my own property. They implied that my failure to immediately clear the snow constituted negligence on my part. The letter made my blood boil, especially the last paragraph, which reminded me that the HOA covenants included a clause stating that disputes should be handled through the HOA's internal mediation process before pursuing legal action, and that if I violated this process, I could be held liable for the HOA's legal fees. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney. Her name was Rachel Morrison, and she specialized in property law and HOA disputes. Her office was in downtown Boulder, in one of those renovated buildings near Pearl Street. Rachel was in her mid-30s with sharp eyes and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. I walked her through everything: the vote, Brenda's retaliation, the snow, the damage, and the HOA's response. "You have witnesses?" she asked, taking notes. "My neighbor Tom saw the whole thing, and I have photos time-stamped from that morning showing the snow piled against my foundation." "Good. What about video?" "I don't have security cameras, if that's what you're asking." "That's fine. The photos and witness testimony should be enough." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's the situation. You have a strong case for property damage caused by negligence, possibly even intentional misconduct. The HOA's attorney is trying to hide behind the community service angle, but that doesn't give Mrs. Patterson carte blanche to cause damage to your property. What about their mediation clause? It's fairly standard, but it doesn't prevent you from pursuing civil action for property damage. Mediation requirements typically apply to disputes about covenant enforcement, not torts. That said, I'd recommend we at least attempt mediation in good faith. It protects you from the argument that you didn't exhaust internal remedies, and it gives us a chance to see if they'll settle without litigation." "You think they'll settle?" Rachel smiled slightly. "Probably not initially. People like this HOA president, they don't like to admit they're wrong. But once they see we're serious and understand the strength of our case, they might reconsider. especially when they realize their insurance might not cover this either, since it was a deliberate act. What do you charge? For HOA cases, I typically work on a contingency basis if the damages are significant enough. You're looking at $20,000 in repairs, possibly more. I'd take 30% of whatever we recover, plus you'd be responsible for filing fees and other court costs up front. But if we win, those costs usually get added to what the defendant has to pay. I hired her on the spot. The mediation was scheduled for 3 weeks later, giving us time to prepare and allowing the HOA to review our case. In the meantime, I had to deal with the ongoing water problem in my basement. I set up a dehumidifier and checked the space daily for signs of mold. A few of my stored boxes had been damaged beyond recovery, including some old photos that I managed to salvage by carefully separating and air drying them. It was heartbreaking work. The day of the mediation arrived. It was held at a conference room in a neutral office building in Boulder. The mediator was a retired judge named Harold Brennan, a man in his 70s with a calm demeanor and a reputation for being fair but firm. I arrived with Rachel. Brenda showed up with Gregory Winters, the HOA attorney, and surprisingly, her husband, Donald Patterson. Donald was a quiet man who worked in IT and usually stayed out of HOA business. His presence suggested Brenda was taking this more seriously than her initial response had indicated. Judge Brennan started by explaining the mediation process. This is a voluntary and confidential process. Nothing said here can be used in court if we don't reach an agreement. The goal is to find a resolution that both parties can live with. Let's start by having each side present their perspective. Rachel went first, laying out our case methodically. She presented the photos showing the snow piled against my foundation, Tom's written statement as a witness, the waterproofing estimate, and a timeline connecting Brenda's actions to the HOA vote that had occurred 3 weeks before the snow incident. Mrs. Patterson didn't just make a mistake, Rachel said. She deliberately targeted Mr. Sullivan's property in retaliation for him exercising his rights as a homeowner. The result has been nearly $20,000 in damage and ongoing anxiety about the structural integrity of his home. Gregory Winters responded with the same arguments from his letter. Routine snow removal, no malicious intent, homeowner responsibility. Judge Brennan listened to both sides, then turned to Brenda. Mrs. Patterson, I'd like to hear from you directly. Why did you push the snow against Mr. Sullivan's foundation when you didn't do the same for other properties on the street? Brenda hesitated. I could see her wrestling with how to answer. I was just trying to clear the street efficiently. The snow had to go somewhere. But it didn't go somewhere on the other properties, the judge said gently. According to these photos, you created piles along the curb or on the tree lawn for every other house. Only Mr. Sullivan's property received snow directly against the foundation. Why? I don't know, Brenda said, her voice tight. Maybe the angle was different there. It's a corner lot. Mrs. Patterson, Judge Brennan said, his tone still gentle but with an edge of steel. I've been doing this for a long time. I can tell when someone is being evasive. If we're going to reach an agreement today, I need honesty. Was there any reason, personal or otherwise, that Mr. Sullivan's property was treated differently? The room went silent. Brenda looked at her lawyer, who gave her a slight nod. We've had disagreements, Brenda finally admitted. Jason has been difficult regarding HOA matters. By difficult, do you mean he voted against a proposal you supported? Rachel asked. He's voted against several initiatives that would have improved the neighborhood, Brenda said defensively. He doesn't seem to understand that an HOA requires cooperation. And you felt that justified damaging his property, Judge Brennan asked. I didn't intend to damage anything, Brenda insisted. I was just clearing snow. In a manner you didn't use for any other property that morning, the judge said. Mrs. Patterson, let me be frank. If this goes to court, a jury is going to see those photos. They're going to hear about the timing relative to the HOA vote. They're going to hear testimony from a witness. And they're going to conclude that this was retaliatory. When that happens, you're not just looking at compensatory damages for the repairs. You're potentially looking at punitive damages. Colorado law allows for treble damages in cases of willful misconduct. Gregory Winters leaned over and whispered something to Brenda. Her face went pale. What would treble damages mean? Donald Patterson spoke up for the first time. He looked genuinely worried. It means if the court finds that your wife acted willfully to cause damage, they can triple the award, Judge Brennan explained. $20,000 becomes $60,000, plus attorney fees and court costs. And I should mention that homeowners insurance typically doesn't cover intentional acts. You'd be paying that out of pocket. Donald turned to his wife. Brenda, what did you do? I didn't mean for this to happen, Brenda said, and for the first time she looked genuinely distressed rather than defiant. I was just angry. He voted against the paint colors, and then at the meeting he made me look foolish in front of everyone. I didn't make you look foolish, I said, speaking up for the first time. I just disagreed with you. That's what democracy looks like, even in an HOA. I know, Brenda said quietly. She looked down at her hands. I know. Judge Brennan let the silence sit for a moment, then said, Let's talk about resolution. Mr. Sullivan, what are you looking for here? I want my foundation fixed, I said. I want to be made whole. I'm not looking to punish anyone or make this bigger than it needs to be. I just want my house repaired and an assurance that nothing like this will happen again. Mrs. Patterson, the judge said, are you prepared to take responsibility for the repairs? Brenda looked at her husband, then at her lawyer, then back at the judge. Yes, she said, we'll pay for the repairs. I want that in writing, Rachel said immediately. A binding agreement that includes the full cost of repairs as outlined in the estimate, plus any additional costs discovered during the work, up to a reasonable cap. I'd suggest $25,000 as the cap. $25,000, Gregory Winters said. The estimate was $20,000. The estimate was $15,000 to $20,000, with the possibility of additional damage, Rachel corrected. We need a cap that covers potential complications. Mr. Sullivan shouldn't have to come back if the excavation reveals additional problems. We spent the next hour hammering out the details. The final agreement stipulated that Brenda and Donald Patterson would pay for all foundation repairs up to $25,000. The payment would be made directly to the waterproofing company. In exchange, I would release them from further liability related to this specific incident. The agreement also included a clause requiring Brenda to hire a professional snow removal service for the remainder of the winter and all future winters, with the cost to be borne personally by her, not the HOA. Additionally, and this was Rachel's brilliant touch, Brenda had to draft and sign a formal apology to be read at the next HOA meeting and included in the community newsletter. The apology would acknowledge that she had acted inappropriately and that all homeowners had the right to vote their conscience without fear of retaliation. When we finally signed the agreement, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Donald Patterson approached me as we were packing up. I'm sorry about all this, he said. I didn't know what she'd done until a few days ago. Brenda gets intense about the HOA. I've told her to step back, but she sees it as her responsibility. I get wanting to improve the neighborhood, I said. But there's a line between leadership and tyranny. I know, he said. She's going to resign as president. It's part of an understanding we came to after your lawsuit was filed. She doesn't know I'm telling you this, but I wanted you to know. This has been a wake-up call for her and for me too. I should have paid more attention to what was happening. The repairs started 2 weeks later. Mike's crew excavated along the front of my house, exposing the foundation. As predicted, they found a few additional cracks and some erosion that needed attention. The final cost came to $23,000, well within the cap we'd negotiated. The HOA meeting where Brenda read her apology was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The community center was packed. Word had gotten around about what happened, and everyone wanted to see how it would play out. Brenda stood at the front of the room, her usual confidence completely absent. She read from a prepared statement, her voice shaky. "I want to apologize to Jason Sullivan and to this community. I allowed personal feelings to cloud my judgment, and I acted in a way that was inappropriate and harmful. Every member of this HOA has the right to voice their opinions and vote according to their beliefs. I violated that principle, and I betrayed your trust as president. Effective immediately, I am resigning as HOA president. I hope that in time I can regain your trust as a neighbor and community member." There was scattered applause, though I noticed several people sitting in stony silence. Linda Kowalski, the vice president, stood up and announced that she would serve as interim president until the next election. She also announced that the board would be reviewing all HOA policies and procedures to ensure better oversight and accountability. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner about Brenda's behavior. Others thanked me for standing up to her. Tom clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did good, man. Someone needed to put her in check." But the most meaningful conversation was with Margaret Chen, the HOA secretary. She was a retired schoolteacher in her 60s, and she'd always struck me as kind but conflict-averse. "I'm ashamed," she told me. "I sat on that board for 3 years and watched Brenda bully people. I told myself it wasn't my business or that she knew best. But you're right. There's a line and she crossed it repeatedly. I should have said something sooner." "You can say something now," I told her. "You're still on the board. Help make sure this doesn't happen again." "I will," she promised. The repairs were completed by mid-March. My basement was dry, the foundation was sealed, and new drainage had been installed to prevent future problems. Mike had done excellent work, and he documented everything meticulously, which gave me peace of mind. In April, the HOA held its annual election. Linda Kowalski was elected president with overwhelming support. One of her first acts was to propose a new set of bylaws that included term limits for board positions, a formal complaint process for homeowners who felt they were being treated unfairly, and a requirement that any HOA board member who used their position for personal retaliation would be immediately removed and banned from holding future positions. The bylaws passed unanimously. I continued living in my house on Aspen Drive, and eventually, life returned to normal. Brenda kept a low profile. I'd see her occasionally, usually when she was getting her mail or leaving for work. She'd offer a small wave or a tight smile, and I'd nod back. We weren't friends, and we probably never would be, but the hostility was gone. One Saturday in May, I was outside planting flowers in my front garden when Brenda crossed the street and approached me. I'll admit, my first instinct was defensiveness, but her body language wasn't aggressive. "Those look nice," she said, gesturing to the petunias I was arranging. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "I've been seeing a therapist. Donald insisted on it after everything that happened. She's helped me realize that I was using the HOA as a way to feel in control. After I lost my job a few years ago, I felt powerless. The HOA presidency gave me a sense of purpose, but I took it way too far. I appreciate you telling me that, I said. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said quickly. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I'm sorry, truly. I accept your apology, I said. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, and walked back to her house. That conversation stuck with me for a long time. It's easy to turn people into villains, to see them as one-dimensional antagonists in our own stories. But the truth is usually more complicated. Brenda had acted terribly, and she'd caused real damage to my property and my peace of mind. But she was also a person dealing with her own struggles, who'd made bad choices and was trying to do better. By summer, Meadowbrook Heights felt like a different place. The new HOA leadership was more collaborative and less authoritarian. When proposals came up, there was actual discussion and compromise. Tom Richards proposed a neighborhood block party for the 4th of July, and it was approved without any drama. It was the first social event the HOA had sponsored in years that actually felt fun rather than obligatory. I spent the 4th of July eating hamburgers and playing cornhole with my neighbors. Kids ran through sprinklers. Someone had set up a speaker system and was playing classic rock. As the sun set and we waited for the fireworks to start, I looked around at the community and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A genuine sense of belonging. Linda Kowalski came over with a beer for me. "Hell of a year," she said. "You can say that again," I replied. "I'm glad you didn't just roll over when Brenda pulled that snow stunt," Linda said. "A lot of people would have. They'd have paid for the repairs themselves and just tried to keep their heads down." I thought about it, I admitted, but it felt like giving in to a bully. And I guess I was angry enough that I wasn't willing to do that. "Well, the whole neighborhood is better for it," she said. "You forced us all to take a hard look at how things were being run. That was long overdue." As fireworks began exploding overhead, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant colors, I thought about everything that had happened. The stress, the expense, the confrontation, all of it had been worth it. Not just because I'd gotten my house repaired, though that was important, but because sometimes standing up for yourself isn't just about you. It's about setting a standard for how people should treat each other. The following week, I received a check in the mail. It was from Donald and Brenda Patterson, and it was for $300. There was a note attached in Brenda's handwriting, "For the boxes and photos that were damaged in your basement. I know it doesn't replace the sentimental value, but I wanted to do something." I stood in my kitchen, looking at that check and that note, and I felt something unexpected: closure. The whole ordeal was finally, truly over. I deposited the check and used some of the money to buy new storage containers for my basement, the waterproof kind this time. The rest I donated to a local charity that helped people with housing issues. It felt like the right way to close that chapter. By the time winter rolled around again, almost a full year after the snow incident, Meadowbrook Heights had transformed. The professional snow removal company that Brenda had been required to hire did an excellent job, clearing streets and driveways without damaging property. The HOA had built up a small reserve fund specifically for emergency repairs and community improvements, funded through voluntary contributions rather than arbitrary fines. In November, Linda Kowalski asked if I'd consider joining the HOA board as treasurer. Robert Fitzgerald was moving to Arizona, and they needed someone who understood finances and wasn't afraid to ask tough questions. I thought about it for a week before saying yes. I'd learned that you can't complain about how things are run if you're not willing to step up and help run them better. Besides, I had a vested interest in making sure Meadowbrook Heights remained a place where homeowners could disagree without fear of retaliation. My first board meeting was in December. It was remarkably civil. We discussed snow removal procedures for the upcoming season, planned a holiday decoration contest that was voluntary rather than mandatory, and reviewed the budget. At one point, Margaret Chen made a suggestion about how to better communicate with homeowners who couldn't attend meetings in person, and we actually listened and implemented her idea. It was such a stark contrast to how things had worked under Brenda's leadership that I almost couldn't believe it was the same organization. After the meeting, Linda pulled me aside. "You're going to be good at this," she said. "You ask the right questions. You don't just go along to get along." "I learned that the hard way," I said with a laugh. "The best lessons usually are," she replied. "Christmas came and went. I hosted my parents for the holidays, and they were impressed by how nice the neighborhood looked. My mom, who had worried about me moving to Colorado after growing up in Ohio, finally seemed to relax about my choice. "This is a good community," she said on Christmas Eve, looking out at the houses decorated with lights. "You can tell people actually care about each other here." "They do now," I said. "It wasn't always like this." I told her the whole story over hot chocolate. She listened, occasionally shaking her head or gasping at particularly egregious details. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said when I finished. "Your father and I raised you to not be a doormat, but I'm even more proud that you gave that woman grace when she apologized. A lot of people would have held a grudge forever." "Life's too short for grudges," I said. "Besides, I have to live across from her. Might as well make it bearable." New Year's Eve found me at another neighborhood party, this one hosted by Tom and his wife, Sarah. As midnight approached, we counted down together, and when the clock struck 12, everyone cheered and hugged. Brenda and Donald were there, staying mostly to themselves but looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. As the party wound down and people started heading home, Donald approached me at the coat rack. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. "For not destroying Brenda completely," he said. "You could have. You had every right to go scorched earth, but you took what you needed and let her keep her dignity. That meant everything to our marriage, to our lives here. She's a different person now. Happier, actually. Less stressed." "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "Honestly, I never wanted to destroy anyone. I just wanted my house fixed." "Well, you got more than that," Donald said. "You fixed a whole community." Walking home that night, boots crunching on the light dusting of snow that had fallen earlier, I reflected on Donald's words. I hadn't set out to fix anything except my foundation. But by refusing to be bullied, by standing up for my rights, I'd accidentally started a chain reaction that had improved everyone's lives. January brought more snow, but this time it was handled professionally and efficiently. No one's foundation was damaged. No one was targeted. It was just normal winter maintenance, the way it should have always been. In February, exactly 1 year after the incident, I stood in my kitchen with my morning coffee, looking out at the same view. The Flatirons were pink with sunrise. Snow covered the ground. Everything looked similar to that morning a year ago, but everything was different. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Anniversary of Snowgate. How does it feel to be a neighborhood legend?" I laughed and texted back. Like I need another cup of coffee, but actually it felt good. Not the legendary part, but the knowledge that I'd handled a difficult situation the right way. I'd stood up for myself without becoming the villain. I'd sought justice without seeking revenge. I'd held someone accountable while still allowing them room for redemption. The next HOA meeting was that evening. We had a full agenda. discussing spring landscaping plans, reviewing the financials, and addressing a request from a homeowner who wanted to install solar panels. Under Brenda's regime, that request would have been immediately denied as not fitting the neighborhood aesthetic. Under Linda's leadership, we'd actually research the issue, consider the environmental and financial benefits, and try to find a solution that worked for everyone. I spent the afternoon preparing the financial report. The HOA was in good shape. We had money in reserves, no outstanding debts, and several community improvement projects in the pipeline. It was amazing what could be accomplished when people worked together instead of against each other. That evening's meeting was productive and ended on time, without drama or raised voices. Afterward, several of us went to a local brewery to continue discussions in a more relaxed setting. It had become a tradition, a way to build relationships beyond the formal board structure. As I sat there with my neighbors, laughing at Tom's terrible jokes and debating the merits of different pizza toppings, I realized something important. This was what community was supposed to feel like. Not perfect, not without disagreements, but fundamentally respectful and supportive. Linda raised her glass. "A toast," she said, "to surviving winter, to good neighbors, and to the fact that we all learned something valuable this year." "What's that?" Margaret asked. "That one person standing up for what's right can change everything," Linda said, looking directly at me. Everyone clinked glasses, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride in equal measure. The rest of that winter passed peacefully. I continued my work as treasurer, finding it more rewarding than I'd expected. In March, we approved the solar panel request with reasonable guidelines to ensure the installation looked clean and professional. The homeowner was thrilled, and 2 other families immediately submitted similar requests. In April, I got a promotion at work. I was an engineer for a renewable energy company, and my new role meant more responsibility, but also more flexibility to work from home. It was perfect timing, because I'd been thinking about ways to be more involved in the community, and the flexible schedule would help. May brought the annual HOA election again. Linda was re-elected as president, and I was re-elected as treasurer. The vote was unanimous, which felt good. Margaret Chen stepped down as secretary, saying she wanted to travel more, but she nominated a young couple, Amy and Brian Foster, who just moved to the neighborhood. Brian was elected, bringing fresh energy to the board. The summer was busy with community events. We organized a neighborhood yard sale, a summer concert series in the park, and weekly food truck nights. These weren't mandatory HOA activities. They were genuine community building that people actually wanted to attend. In July, I was trimming my hedges when Brenda came over. It was the first time we'd had a substantial conversation since her apology the previous year. "Your yard looks great," she said. "Thanks," I replied. "I've been trying to keep up with it." "I've been thinking about that paint color proposal," she said. "The one that started all the trouble." "Oh," I wasn't sure where this was going. "I was wrong about it," she said. "Not just about how I reacted when it was voted down, but about the proposal itself. It was too controlling. People should be able to choose their own paint colors within reason." I was trying to force my aesthetic on everyone else. "To be fair, some HOA guidelines make sense," I said. "We probably don't want someone painting their house neon orange with purple polka dots." She laughed. "True. But there's a middle ground between anarchy and dictatorship." "I couldn't see that before. You see it now," I said. "That's what matters." "I'm thinking about running for the board again," she said. "Not president, just a regular member. Donald thinks I'm crazy, but I feel like I owe it to the community to do it right this time." "I think that's a good idea," I said, and I meant it. You've learned from your mistakes. That experience could be valuable. You really think so? I do. Plus, you know all the history and the covenants. That institutional knowledge is useful as long as it's applied with the right attitude. She smiled, and it was genuine, reaching her eyes. Thank you, Jason. That means a lot. As fall approached, Brenda announced her intention to run for a regular board position in the next election. Some neighbors were skeptical, but others, remembering her effective management skills when they weren't being used for tyranny, were supportive. In October, I was invited to speak at a regional HOA conference in Denver. Apparently, word had spread about the transformation of Meadowbrook Heights, and other communities wanted to know how we'd turned things around. I was nervous but agreed to do it. Standing in front of 100 HOA board members from across Colorado, I told the story. Not just about the snow and the foundation, but about what came after. About how accountability and grace could coexist. About how communities thrive when people feel empowered rather than controlled. The key, I told them, is remembering that HOAs exist to serve homeowners, not the other way around. Rules have their place, but they should enhance quality of life, not diminish it. And when someone makes a mistake, even a serious one, there has to be room for growth and redemption. The response was overwhelming. During the Q&A session, person after person shared their own HOA horror stories, and we discussed strategies for creating healthier community dynamics. Several people asked for my contact information to continue the conversation. Driving home that evening, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't expected. What had started as a personal grievance over damaged property had evolved into something much larger. I'd accidentally become an advocate for better HOA governance, and surprisingly, I was okay with that. November brought the election. Brenda ran for a board position and won, though not with the overwhelming margin Linda and I had received. She'd have to prove herself, and everyone knew it. At her first meeting back on the board, she was quiet, listening more than talking, offering suggestions rather than demands. It was a remarkable transformation. December marked the 2-year anniversary of my purchase of the house. As I hung Christmas lights, I thought about how much had changed. The house itself looked better than ever, with its repaired foundation and improved drainage. The neighborhood was healthier, with engaged residents and responsive leadership. And I'd found a sense of community that I'd been missing since leaving Ohio. My parents came for Christmas again, and this time my brother joined us with his family. We had a full house, and it felt wonderful. On Christmas Day, several neighbors stopped by with cookies and well wishes. Brenda and Donald came too, bearing a homemade pie and warm smiles. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Brenda said quietly as they were leaving. "Not everyone would have. We all deserve second chances," I told her. "Merry Christmas, Brenda." After they left, my brother pulled me aside. "That's the HOA lady who damaged your house." "Yeah," I said. "And you're friends now." "I wouldn't say friends exactly, but we've made peace. Life's too short to hold on to anger." "You're a better man than me," my brother said, shaking his head. "I'd still be fuming." "I was fuming for a while," I admitted. "But staying angry doesn't hurt the person you're angry at. It just hurts you." As another new year approached, I found myself making a list of goals. Some were personal. Get in better shape, read more books, learn to ski. Others were community-focused. Organize a neighborhood emergency preparedness program. Explore ways to make the HOA more inclusive for renters who lived in the few properties that weren't owner-occupied. Mentor the newer board members. At the New Year's Eve party, which had become an annual tradition, Linda pulled me aside. "I want you to think about running for president next year," she said. "What? No, you're doing great." "I am, but I'm also getting tired. and you have a vision for what this community can be. Plus, people trust you. You've earned that trust. I'll think about it, I said, though the idea terrified me. But as I watched the neighbors I'd come to care about counting down to midnight, I realized that maybe it wasn't such a crazy idea. I'd learned that leadership wasn't about control. It was about service. It wasn't about imposing your will. It was about facilitating everyone's voice. When midnight came and the room erupted in cheers, I felt optimistic about the future in a way I hadn't in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew this community could handle them. We'd proven that already. In the weeks that followed, I found myself seriously considering Linda's suggestion. I talked to my parents, to Tom, to several other neighbors. Everyone encouraged me to go for it. Even Brenda, in a moment of irony that wasn't lost on either of us, told me I should run. "You'd be good at it," she said. "Better than I was. You actually listen to people." "I learned from watching what didn't work," I told her. "Then my mistakes had purpose," she said with a sad smile. By February, I'd made my decision. I would run for HOA president in the April election. But I wouldn't run alone. I'd run on a platform of collaboration and transparency. I spent weeks talking to homeowners, asking what they wanted from their HOA, what frustrated them, what they hoped to see change. The campaign, if you could call it that, was nothing like a political race. I simply listened and promised to represent everyone's interests fairly. My opponent was a nice guy named Marcus, who'd moved to the neighborhood 6 months ago. He ran on a platform of tech improvements, wanting to modernize our communication systems. His ideas were good, and I told him so, promising to implement them regardless of who won. The election was held on a Tuesday evening in April. By 8 o'clock, the results were in. I'd won with 68% of the vote. Marcus graciously conceded and immediately volunteered to chair a technology committee to implement his modernization ideas. Standing at the front of the community center, looking out at the faces of my neighbors, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. But I also felt ready. "Thank you for your trust," I said. "I promise to serve this community with integrity, transparency, and respect for everyone's voice. We've come a long way in the past couple of years. Let's keep moving forward together." The room applauded, and I saw Brenda in the back, clapping along with everyone else. Our eyes met and she nodded slightly. It was a small gesture, but it carried enormous meaning. Full circle, from antagonist to supporter, from conflict to collaboration. That night, as I sat in my living room with a glass of whiskey, I thought about the journey. It had started with anger and a pile of snow against my foundation. It had led through mediation, apologies, community transformation, and now to leadership. None of it was what I'd planned when I bought this house 3 years ago, but all of it felt right. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Morrison, the attorney who'd represented me. She'd somehow heard about the election. "Congratulations, Mr. President. Try not to push snow against anyone's foundation. It's a lot of paperwork." I laughed out loud and texted back, "Lesson learned." The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee. Standing in my kitchen, looking out at the Flatirons painted pink by sunrise, I realized this had become my favorite moment of the day. The quiet, the beauty, the promise of what was to come. There was still snow on the ground, but spring was coming. Soon the flowers would bloom, the trees would leaf out, and the neighborhood would come alive with activity. There would be challenges ahead, disagreements to mediate, problems to solve, but I was ready. Because I'd learned that standing up for yourself isn't just about fighting back. It's about setting a standard for how people should treat each other. It's about turning conflict into opportunity. It's about building something better from the broken pieces. My foundation was solid now, both literally and figuratively. And I was going to make sure everyone else's was too.